Assalamu alaikum. Is it on? Can you hear me? Can we start? Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. I thought we would just start with a minute of silence. The exercise that we did with Muna this morning. Just close your eyes, go inward, find your stillness. Alhamdulillah. So with me on the stage, I have these wonderful young men, Hasnain Ibrahim and Muhammad Bulbulia, who will be reciting some of Shaykh Fadhlalla's poetry from Look Again. Bismillah.
As we've brought our finest attention to our breath, we will begin with a poem of Shaykh Fadhlalla's, True Self. Be yourself. They all said that. Ignorant folks sound incredible. You try and fail, more confused. Where, what, and who is the self? Absurd wisdom, tiresome, while suffering constantly, stumbling within shadows, weeping for the soulmate. Perhaps that is what they refer to as the real self. My soul.
Good afternoon. This poem is called The Potter's Dance. Bismillah. The sun flung its beam upon the potter's bridge, then weaved its way along clay creations, hard and soft. Ash, mud and water, light and darkness. Then the sun took the sky, and the earth and all in between. The potter danced, smashing his way. All is done, and all returns, one by one, to the only one.
Begging for change. After disasters, bleeding at the door, weeping for mercy. Today, now, for better destiny, with dignity, with honor. For God's sake, for His grace. A change from the past, for better future. Please, God, bring the change.
All in all. This is the question, bigger than life itself, unending as life itself, bigger than life and death, or appearance and absence, or illusions of achievements crying out for conclusions. This question is bigger than the universe itself. It contains all questions, known and unknown, and all answers, mostly unknown, yet contains all news and views before feeble minds interfered, distracting and attracting, before oneness embraced otherness, where light was before life, before time filled up space, before needs and desires dreamt up climbing ladders out of confusions that only lead to more questions, filling up minds and polluting hearts, whilst the origin of life smiles upon existence, and its other offsprings, and lights of truth illumines all, always.
Can we have one more?
One more each, please.
Honest testing. Devastated by truth, all covers removed. Your reason and other pretenses devastated by truth. All dualities removed by the light of the singularity. Now you know the end of no end, clear and everlasting, when everything else stopped. Now you know the end of no end, clear and everlasting, when everything else stopped.
Concealed deception. Asked about control. I knew the trick. Nothing. And then again, what do you want? My pretending smile concealed a million desires, some new, fresh, others ancient, lost in time. Then again, how much? The sky is vast. Passions too, fireballs, hidden behind rose bushes. Truth within falsehood. Polite, friendly gestures. Taught by a hyena. Circus trained by robot monkeys. Dressed up as guides and teachers. And other motivational preachers. Or business leaders. Or political appeasers. Self-assured, absorbed in the fog and darkness of everyday life, and other shades of ignorance, confused minds, dark hearts and delusions, announcing business as usual. We are a great success.
One more? Encore?
Yes, one more.
I'm enjoying it. So. Waking up. Stop all and be silent. Then be still completely. Be at one with nothingness, beyond and before existence and creation. And that is where your origin and light resides. And then only now you know the ignorance of sleepwalkers, where you emerged from.
Much.
One moment, please. The way. When asked direction, he pointed all around, then said, "Your destination, pointing everywhere. It is all here, there and here, all of space, every place, if not here and now, there and then, It is a path where all emanates from and leads back to it.
Next up is Muna Bilgrami, and she will be talking about the hidden stories we tell ourselves. I don't want to introduce Muna too much because most of us know her, and we might be here till late in the evening if I start talking about Muna.
That would be too long a story.
But I will say this. Shaykh Fadhlalla gave me the advice years ago that I should find my tribe. I should find my Sahaba. Those people who inspire us and who we can go to. And Muna for me has been that and is. She's my soul sister.
Can I die now? Thank you. Thank you for that generous introduction. Assalamu alaikum, good afternoon. Greetings of peace to you all. I thought I'd speak about conditioning narratives, the hidden stories we tell ourselves. There's an ayah in the Quran that says, surely Allah does not change the condition of a people until they change their own condition. What is it that we are seeking and how do we get it? I love the brevity and the to-the-pointness of this theme of our gathering this year. Fortunately, so much has already been covered that directly pertains to my chosen title. And especially we had in such a very real, experiential way, we saw the truth of our conditioning, how it affects our physicality through the kinesiology presentation. And of course, Shaykh Fadhlalla's talk this morning took us on a whirlwind tour of reality. I hope by the adhan of Allah to be true to the spirit in which this title was given. For the matter of our awakening is urgent. Every second that passes, we're 1 second closer to death. The sages, both ancient and modern, prophets, saints, neuroscientists and quantum physicists, tell us that time is an illusion. There is only the now. And that the now is infinite. But to my conditioned, individuated mind, that now is about to end, only to become another now, but the sense of an end is ever near. So what are we seeking and how can we attain it? Or what am I seeking and how do I get it? As Shaykh Fadhlalla asked, who's the I that is asking this question? I cannot presume to offer answers to these questions. I can offer more questions. Whatever I say, may Allah forgive me for opening my mouth, has already been said before by many more able and qualified people. All of you, I believe, in fact, know the answer to the question, consciously or unconsciously, maybe more the latter than the former. In a very real sense, I'm just reordering some of the thoughts that you've already thunk. My mind feels so at one with everybody here right now that I find it hard to believe, Mullah Nasruddin Effendi style, that you don't all have access to my thoughts. But I will share the stories of some others as we go along. So the title of our gathering suggests a journey. The very idea of a conference, conferring, coming together, implies that it's a journey already in itself, coming here. Our wisdom traditions are replete with the imagery of travel. Seek knowledge, though it be in China. Seek, and ye shall find. A journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. Journeys, as we know, imply charts and maps. These annual conferences have consistently invited us to read the map of our conditioning. On any interior journey into the darkness of our unseen selves, the topography of our hidden stories is illuminated by flashes of light. If we are to locate our personal GPS coordinates, we need to plot our compass bearings. The ultimate journey is indicated by the prophetic aphorism with which most of you here are very well familiar. Man arafa nafsahu faqad arafa rabbahu. Whoever knows himself knows his Lord. The Islamic sciences of the self reveal how through the created self you come to know the Creator, through the portal of our condition as abd, as the servant, the worshipper, or devotee. The force of lordship engages us. Among the prominent ways we refer to our originator in our deen, in Islam, is as the Rabb, or Lord. There is an implied transactionality here. Lordship, in the Quranic sense, invokes rububiyyah, which derives from the action meaning to raise, to grow, to cultivate. It requires an object of cultivation. Rububiyyah requires ubudiyyah. The experience of lordship can only manifest in relation to that which needs to be raised, i.e. the abd, the devotee, sometimes translated into the words servant or slave or bondsman, terms that can hardly be now used these days without the distorting filters of centuries of human exploitation and injustice. In Spectrum of Reality, Shaykh Fadhlalla says, normal consciousness is limited and conditioned. It derives its energy from boundless supreme consciousness. To respond appropriately to our human limitations and drives, we need to awaken to higher levels of consciousness. Our humanity includes numerous levels and intensities of connectedness, empathy, and interactive dynamics. So I thought I'd like to look at some of these key points and dynamics. We are all conditioned by many intersecting forces and contexts. Figuring out our personal cartography starts by witnessing our conditioning, by becoming aware. Why is it important? To save ourselves from unnecessary suffering, to live a liberated life, by which I mean unburdened by negative, limiting beliefs, judgments, and opinions. Our experiences shape us and they become our reality. There's been much recently on the biology of belief written and talked about. But through which filters are we experiencing this? Through our social conditions, our biology, our compelling inner drives? What pertains to us and what does not? How does my apparent personal agency interact with my context? Are we fixed in ourselves or are we fluid? Can we, in fact, change and transform? Am I the person who I think I am? Or is who I think I am something I have been taught to believe? What is real and what is not? I think I could just carry on asking all these kinds of questions and leave you to ponder the answers. Some of these conditionings we're conscious of and some we are not. But all of these forces intersect, creating our unique biography and identity. Siddhartha was unconscious of the plight of others and reality with a capital R until he left the palace precincts and embarked on a journey that exposed him to a wider world and the ugliness of humankind that propelled him further in his quest for truth and peace. So we know that we cannot but be programmed and conditioned. No one escapes learning limitations. In fact, everything is functional and contingent on our location in time and space, or where you grew up and how. You are programmed biologically wanting to bond, other ones being for food, sex, safety, to grow and just live. Your interaction with your family, your neighborhood, your community, your schooling, your society, your career, your socioeconomic class, your country, your race and gender, all of that conditioning starts in the womb. But you're also programmed to want to thrive. Witness the relentless quest for happiness and self-fulfillment. And so oftentimes we encompass contradictory stories. For example, I was raised to believe that the world is my oyster. But in every country I've ever lived, I've been told that I can only have the fruits of its seas if I have a visa. And so one layer of politically charged social conditioning sits like a heavy blanket on my spirit's impulse of belief. Most of us grow to become conscious of some of the influences that shape us, how we were raised, educated, how we spend our time, how we live, where we live, and how we earn, our hobbies, our friends, our choice of profession or lack of choice of profession, our politics. But we are often not conscious of how these defined parameters of behavior and expectations become our own stories. The socializationing and conditioning is so deep. We identify with inherited narratives so viscerally that we think we chose to be this way, or that the way things are is in fact reality. This mistake of identification and ownership is what our religious and spiritual practices try to mitigate and eventually transcend. But as each one of us knows, they often become part of that mistake. And I'll include a story or two later that will illustrate that. So some of us find it hard to accept these narratives into which we are supposed to fit in. In a sense, we are all storyboards upon whom different narratives are being inscribed. But we have been told now, through this example that we've just seen in kinesiology, and by scientists, neuroscientists, that if you change your beliefs, you can change your relationship to reality. You can alter your narratives. I've already said that if we are to engage creatively and proactively with our conditioning, we need to locate ourselves in the topography of awakening consciousness. We are heavily influenced by the hidden stories of everyone around us. So we need to come to understand not just where we are and how we are, but also not in relationship just to our context and time, but also to ourselves. The history and geography of our lives is intersected by our socioeconomic backgrounds, the politics we grew up with, and the political zeitgeist that we are exposed to. The narratives we tell ourselves about us and the world are, in fact, just interpretations of reality. All of our attitudes and beliefs and expectations, our values, our desires, and our goals are shaped by bigger stories, working their way into our narratives. And regardless of the provenance or the origin of our conditioning, it's characterized by repetition. The neural pathways that are worn away by habitual stimulation and the trigger points that can be set off by anything that taps into those patterns. So we may be conscious of the effects of how we were raised, or our nutrition, how our lunch has made us feel now, amiable and friendly, or catatonic, having eaten too much rice, or grumpy if you didn't like the food. So our genetic predisposition also, like a submarine running into an iceberg, those run deep. And then there's other layers, like the epigenetic, like how much vitamin D or folic acid a mother had while she was pregnant, or how pollution can induce diseases, and how diet can actually favorably influence whether you succumb to cancer or not. So I wanted us to look at some of the forces that condition the stories that we knowingly or unknowingly tell ourselves. And perhaps you could all join with me in making some suggestions. So starting at the very beginning, before you were born, the intra-utero conditions, your mother's nutrition, her environment and state, the family atmosphere. What else might you all want to suggest that occur to your mind as being a key factor in conditioning? Nabila.
I love this topic. It's so wow. When you're just speaking, I'm like, wow, so many layers upon layers. It's amazing.
Give me one of the layers.
The story of Adam and Hawa. You know that a woman came and all of a sudden, now this man has to go down to earth. So that core wound of unworthiness that perhaps women hold, because of the way the story was told, not because of what it actually meant, but because of the way people took it and said, oh, this is my interpretation of it. Men were all there and great, and then women came and spoiled the whole lot. And that's not actually the case. But women have that wound from being told the story in a way that's so derogatory. Exactly.
Yes, I used to like to comfort myself by saying that the Quranic version of the Adamic story didn't lay the blame squarely on woman, but that's immaterial because it still is. She's from the side. It doesn't say the rib. It's from his side. And they both ate of the tree. But the net effect has been, yes, that is a very real gender-based conditioning. But it's interesting that we don't experience any of these conditionings on their own. They come in multiples, as you said, layering. Anyone else want to suggest another one? I have a few on my list here I can go through. No? So, before any of us were born, the Adam, Eve, the primal story of our origins. But then how we were born, the process, the experience of being born. Thankfully, I don't remember it. Our early childhood, your family dynamics. How were you treated by your siblings or your parents? Were you the eldest? Were you the eldest daughter or were you the eldest son? Or the only child? Were you orphaned or adopted? And were you adopted in a culture that didn't stigmatize it or did stigmatize it? Was there a pecking order among your siblings? If you were the firstborn, did you grow up feeling responsible for the others? Or did you escape and become a rebel? If you were the lastborn, were you indulged or spoiled? Parenting is another conditioning. What was the predominant style of your parenting that you received? Was it controlling, loving, permissive, draconian? Were your parents divorced, acrimoniously, or with kindness? If they were, what kind of parenting did they model separately? Family culture, was it nuclear or extended? Was it conservative or liberal? Was it fair and just or hypocritical and imbued with fear? I spoke to a small circle of friends and associates with a few of these questions about what they experienced as being their seminal conditionings. And one of them, in the context of family culture, shared this with me, that being critical and passing judgment was a family conditioning, and it led to backbiting. But backbiting was something that he had been taught by his Muslim upbringing was quite sinful. So there was a contradiction. But how did he decide to change that? Because as he grew up, he realized he didn't like it. He just decided, I'm not going to be like this. And then he confessed that he hadn't always managed not to backbite. But in his case, other narratives were woven through this one. Being a refugee, the family always entertained worst-case scenarios because they had been forced to become refugees. So the family ethos was focused around savings and thriftiness. Virtues, one might say, in one context, but they became standards to rebel against, or rather, to confront the fear behind them. Your social conditioning from babyhood grows more acute throughout your childhood and your adolescence. It carries on, it never ends. And it often works by rewarding or reinforcing or punishing certain behaviors. For example, children often end up lying because of fear of punishment. Now, your socioeconomic class also has a huge bearing on how you think about yourself and the stories that you tell yourself. Did you grow up with abundance or a sense of deprivation? And how does that shape your attitude to wealth and feeling empowered? One of my interlocutors had spent a childhood and youth in privilege and ease. He witnessed and experienced the abundance of material well-being, emotional support, education, popularity, companionship, friendship, personality. He had everything. Whatever he really wanted was easily achieved without much effort. And from this grew a sense of entitlement. There developed a conditioning that whatever was needed would make itself manifest without him having to overexert himself. So in his case, his sense of entitlement was a positive one, wasn't a negative one. But what also became clear to him was that whatever happened in the outside world actually was never enough. Shaykh Fadhlalla reminded us of that. It's never going to be enough. And that it wasn't a cure for a growing need or sustained happiness. As soon as he started to realize he needed something deeper, his life took a 180-degree turn, and a period of tumultuous external change, movement, and constriction then started. He did not think that he had done anything specifically to overcome a sense of entitlement, but he had learnt more from going through the pains of disappointment, fear of failure, and trying to act more appropriately to what was in front of him. The greatest benefit that had come to him was from being able to watch, wait, and willingly and graciously accept change in life until he automatically felt more in a balance between the inner and the outer. Gender, as you touched upon, Nabila, is a huge source of our inner conditioning. What possibilities were intimated to you while you were growing up because of your sex? As a child, were you taught you could aim for anything, or were you steered as a girl towards a caring career, towards marriage and raising a family? Or was it for both? Were you perhaps the only girl born after a squad of boys, much, much loved and made into the princess who could have her way? But as a boy, did you learn that your parents would be your responsibility in old age? Were you taught to respect women? One of my interviewees shared an adage that he had grown up with. Never miss a bender when it's the feminine gender. I think you have to be of a certain age, of a certain era, to appreciate this. It's, you know, I can hear someone like Benny Hill, British comedy TV, saying something like that, or acting it out. So the environment that he had grown up in was hardly gender sensitive, because it's referring to, you know, giving a woman a smack on the bottom. But were you the last child and the only son, while your sisters were taught to look up to you, and once you were grown up, they had to listen to you? What expectations were placed on you? One of my interviewees said, in contrast to young Indian girls, Indian boys are mostly raised to believe they can be masters of the world. And this doesn't help them become good fathers and husbands. Race, ethnicity, and color. Black is evil. Black is bad. Fairer is more desirable. Who and how is it decided what desirable standards of beauty are? Even beyond beauty, color, and race, there are often qualifications for entry into spaces inaccessible to those without the right attributes. I don't want to speak about South Africa. I'm a visitor here. I don't have enough experience. But I have lived in the Indo-Pak world for quite a while. So I'd like to take, for example, that culture in which I have spent a large portion of my life. And it's racked with classism and racism. And that is born from intersections of various legacies: the Hindu caste system, the British colonial social structures, and also the classist prejudices among Muslims that derive from favor given to certain pedigrees. So among Muslims, there we have Sayyids. Some of them are Siddiqis or Abbasis, who are descended from the Qurayshis and think they are superior. Then, even among the Sayyids, there is further prejudices. If you are deriving your dissension from the family of the Prophet through Najib al-Tarafain, from both Hassan and Hussein, alayhimus salam, both of the two grandsons of the Prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, then you are even more highborn. Some of these cultural prejudices of India have migrated with the community to South Africa. I am informed by reliable sources that among the Memons, the Batwa Memons are considered the Sayyids of their community. They are the supreme. The Surtis are Gujarati from Surat, but they're not Memons. And they regard the Memons as stingy and business-minded. Culturally, they think they are superior. Am I right? But why should the Muslims stop there? We have Turks versus Kurds, Arabs versus Persians, and Persians versus the rest. After I visited Iran for the first time in my life, I realized they were superior. So the politics of our environment or community, whether it's democratic, autocratic, oligarchic, these influence us. Our geography, did we grow up in urban or rural environments? Were we in a coastal or a mountainous setting? Our ecology also, and the historical environment, were we colonized or uncolonized? Were we developed or undeveloped or developing? What was the diet, air, and water resources like? Did we live in a community that practiced judicious stewardship or rapacious exploitation? One of my interviewers talked about his experience in a post-colonial nationalistic framework in which he, for example, if he grew up in Pakistan, you were taught to hate Indians and mistrust them. You were nostalgic for the British, their justice, their efficiency, security, their honesty, their law-observingness. And he had also been taught to distrust black people as a direct heritage of the colonial times, gollywogs. All that changed later when he went to England to work and study and experienced racism firsthand, where he was called a wog or paki. This challenged his perception, and the more he got to know black people and interact with Indians, he realized that he had been told a lie, that they were all the same, they were all human. They too had been given the same conditioning as he had, even the very educated. So a couple of other ways of our conditioning is the way we come to learn and know what we know. There are so many educational systems. And a huge one, which I've already touched on, is our religious beliefs. How is the idea of a creator or originator and sustainer conceived of and invested in? Do we conceive of our God as an anthropomorphized God? One of my interviewees spoke to me about overcoming his religious and social prejudice. He said to me that we were better than other people because we were Muslim. We knew the truth. We had the answer. We were an ummah. That people did not call themselves Muslim. They were unclean, misguided, and going to hell. Because we were Muslim, and if you prayed really sincerely and gained lots of thawab, you would bathe in rivers of milk with huris. So life would become easy. So this attitude had led to an arrogance in him, which, as he grew aware of it, he came to see was misplaced and contradicted other Islamic teachings. And how did he overcome this? He said, deconditioning for me from this was a process. I was egged on by traveling, meeting people outside the community of Islam, and seeing the reality of Muslims in their own countries and different environments. And this revealed to me that this conditioning was just simplistic and nonsensical. Another type of conditioning is notions of success and failure. Having a father like Shaykh Fadhlalla means the bar is set very high as a measure of success, which I think is, are you ready to die? So for me, that's how I gauge success or failure. Am I ready to die? As I said, our position is not only determined by these different strands of influences feeding our identity, but also how these factors interact with each other, compounding and complexifying the matrix of our vision and self-understanding. One of my interviewees gave me a nice, complicated example in her life. It's an entangled story of a successful lawyer, the first Muslim woman of color at the bar in Yorkshire, England. She was of Pakistani origin, but UK born and raised, and she not only confronted the religious and culturally gendered expectations of her family and community, but also society at large that said it was impossible for her to become a lawyer and have a successful career. She had to stand up to her family because they feared she would compromise her Muslim values, as well as to the prevailing belief that the bar wouldn't allow a woman to become a barrister, let alone a woman of color, let alone a Muslim woman. Yet she succeeded without compromising her values and never playing the game of office flirtations or drinking to socialize, and not even letting them peck her on her cheek in greeting. She even got them to allow her to wear trousers. She was invited to become a judge, and she left her profession on the best of terms with her peers, with a formidable reputation for her fearlessness and recognition of a strong identity as a Muslim wife and mother. She had sexism and racism and Islamophobia to contend with. When I asked her what had fed her moral compass to reject these conditioned expectations, she answered, "The very clear, strong voice of Haqq resounding in my soul." Also, sheer defiance. I was sick of the colonialistic superiority mentality of the bar. I just wanted to stick two fingers up and say, I can and will. I'll do whatever I want on my terms. We've had imperialism for centuries. No more. Is it possible to succeed in rewriting the way your hidden narrative proceeds and tells its own story? Many people in this room are living proof that it is. In the state of the world right now, as we experience it, is it the result of our own imaginings? Can we reimagine ourselves? Can we, in fact, reinvent a better world? Can we, in fact, reimagine what being human means? The process of reconditioning habituated stances and outlooks may be hard or easy, or in some ways harder and in other ways easier. It largely depends on the degree of anchoring your identity in fixed points. For one of my interviewees, the most self-limiting belief that he had contended with was identifying as a Muslim. It had led to feeling superior and above others. I'm okay, I'm a follower of Muhammad, a follower of my Shaykh, a follower of the Quran, and he had thought that simply by declaring his allegiances, he had been saved. So awareness alone can trigger off a series of events that changes the course of the hidden narrative. But for most of us, awakening and transformation is gradual. Reevaluating our values, challenging ourselves, and holding ourselves to account are part of this process of cultivating awareness. When our deeper impulse to be free of our false narratives outweighs the discomfort of accepting them, therein lies the catalyst for change, or at the very least, awareness that invites choices. One of the examples that highlights a gradual change in regard to a conditioned gender narrative was, what does it mean to be a man? He challenged himself. He felt that many Muslim men were grateful that they hadn't been created female. And for him, growing up Muslim meant that as a man, he was always to be in control and in authority. And with that responsibility, but along with that authority came responsibility to guide and protect. So when I asked him what was negative about this, he replied, these roles and this idea that it was God-given authority, that this was the correct social pattern, had actually, in his experience, been shown to be the reason why Muslim societies no longer existed, that the Ummah was no longer unified. Islam has become procedural and transactional rather than a means to waking up to our true essence. When I asked him how he had tried to overcome this negative hidden narrative, he said, by recognizing my own prejudices through education, seeing others, respecting them, especially women, and seeing my own hypocrisy, how I treated my own female family members. But it was a gradual process. I'd like to say that, first and foremost, your hidden story is not the barrier to your liberation. It's the actual starting point, or the very fulcrum. And by engaging with it and understanding it and holding it with compassion in the light of the love of Allah, even knowing that it is an intellectual exercise, you have before you a gateway to transformation. And some of the tools that come to us from our own traditions are the following. Your tawajjuh, the direction of your intention, that can generate greater awareness. Reflection, your tafakkur from within yourself, but also the reflection that you get from your community members or a master of self-knowledge if you are fortunate to find one. The sohbah, the company of others, the intimate company of others, on the journey to unveiling our reality, this too can give us glimpses and moments of relief. The best of company is that which elevates us. And then the practices that bring inner stillness, salat, dhikr or invocation, meditation, breathing, mindfulness, all these are useful tools. Service, khidmah, spending of yourself, nafaq. These two are emphasized in our teachings. I'm aware that I need to end. No matter how far you travel in the world, yourself will still be with you. You can never get away from yourself. But many of us misunderstand the spiritual directives to go against the self or nafs, thinking that in our zealousness, the goal of self-annihilation is to obliterate any trace of individuality or personality, or making totally bland the amazing spectrum that is offered within ourselves. Ibn Arabi said, "You cannot know your Lord by making yourself nothing." Many a wise man claims that in order to know one's Lord, one must denude oneself of the signs of one's existence, efface one's identity, and finally rid oneself of oneself. This is a mistake. How could a thing that does not exist try to get rid of its existence? For none of matter exists. And how could a thing that is not become nothing? Imam Ali said, "I wonder at the person who urgently searches for that which he has lost, but he has lost his soul and is not searching for it." He also said, "Whenever the knowledge of a man increases, his attention to his soul also increases, and he tries his best to train and purify it." In summary, we need to understand how our waking consciousness has been conditioned by all the factors that feed into identity in order to go beyond self-identity to affirming the one self. In order to help calm and quieten the inner monologue of our minds and to give it some intellectual anchorage, we need to take our GPS readings. And it will enable us to engage in the negation that precedes the affirmation, the La ilaha before the illallah. I am not this, I am not that. There is only haqq. It is possible to bypass all this thoughtfulness through a devotional path of emptying out and purification. But most of us here have been trained to intellectualize and reason our way through life. So it is to assuage this need that I would like to take us through the idea that by locating ourselves in the topography of these intersecting planes of our lives, we can then travel beyond and boldly go where no one has gone before, to live long and prosper. I invite all of us here to start seeing ourselves, our inner selves, not as incoherent, pulsating neural masses of Pavlovian responses, but as pulsating stars shining a never-ending light. I invite us all to see every negative hidden narrative, obstacle, or challenge as an opportunity to transcend the dross of our own myths, to see every calamity as a chance for serving or improving conditions of ourselves and others, a never-ending process of being true in the moment and living with a sense of freedom. And once we start to become aware of all the rivers flowing into the sea of you, you will soon set sail, even if you feel adrift on an ocean of confusion and choppy waters. Recall what Rumi wrote, "Late by myself, in the boat of myself, no light and no land anywhere, cloud cover thick. I try to stay just above the surface, yet I'm already under and living within the ocean." Thank you.
Thank you, Muna, for sharing these insights from your interviews, snapshots of insights. revealing to us the conditions that condition our consciousness, and that these may not need to be negative, this inner narrative or this story that we tell ourselves, or that when we relate to the mind, but that these can be overcome by tools on this wonderful path that we're on, and that it's not the end, but the beginning or entry points for self-discovery. Thank you. So we've got a small break, 10 minutes. Be on time. Longer? Okay. How long?
We have the panel of the group discussion on spectrum.
Right. Okay, so 40 minutes? 40, half an hour. I say half an hour before we meet here. Yes. So 4:15.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.